to be looked down upon, especially if the entity that did that was a monster, and he threw his pocket knife at the Skull Lord, calling him Bakayaro. The monster wasn't affected by that attack even the slightest, and Kelt realized that that was actually a huge mistake. With another deafening roar, the monster attacked Kelt, who was in mid-air, and its huge sword sliced open his belly. Elma shouted out Kelt's name, but he couldn't do much to help him, as the monster left Kelt alone and turned its focus to Elma now and was rushing at him with full speed. Elma met the monster's attack with another, luckily successful parry, but the monster used that momentum to change its attacking direction, and it raised its sword high up into the air to attack Elma from above. That surprised Elma, as he didn't anticipate something like that, and he knew that such an attack would be way too powerful for him to block or parry, so he knew he had to try and dodge it. The impact of the attack was way too powerful that even the dungeon floor started collapsing, and Elma barely managed to escape. When Elma saw the aftermath of the attack and what it did to the dungeon floor, Elma realized that the Skull Lord's attacking stats had gone back up to its fullest capacity, meaning that all the debuffs are gone. Elma was able to recklessly parry the attacks until then, but now even that wouldn't be possible anymore because the debuffs had gone off. As Kelt was lying down on the floor in a pool of his own blood that came from his stomach, Elma knew that there was no way that he could have survived an attack like that. Oh no, is he really gonna die now? On top of...
Oh. Yeah.
On top of that, the fact that the effects of Elma's disarm skill had worn off, that only meant that other debuffs would also wear very soon if they didn't wear out already. Elma also realized that the Skull Lord wanted to get rid of him as soon as possible because it recognized Elma as its biggest threat, because Elma was giving it the most trouble out of all the adventurers there. But something unexpected had happened as Kelt stood up on his feet, and by yelling and cursing the monster, Kelt fired off another arrow that seemed to have passed right in between the small cracks on the monster's ribcage. It seemed that Kelt's special skill, Fake Death, also worked on such powerful attacks, such as the one from just a couple of moments ago. I mean, Hunters are the most OP class ever. What the hell, man? You're baiting my emotions like that, telling me he's dying, and you're literally giving me a Deus Ex Machina for him to survive the night with his Fake Death spell. What the hell, man? Kelt taunted the monster by saying how foolish it was to forget about him just because his body collapsed onto the floor. I love this. Elma realized that Kelt must have used his special skill right when he was about to be slashed, and that resulted in him staying alive barely. Elma was really satisfied with the outcome of that moment when he told Mabel to heal Lucy and Kelt instead of healing him. On top of that, Elma also used his Protect skill on Kelt, so the damage he would take would be reduced by 30%. They had to take that gamble, and with all the debuffs the monster had on itself, Kelt barely stayed alive and his health points were extremely low to say the least. But thanks to Kelt being brave enough to put his life on the line, he was able to give Elma a great opening, and Elma was really happy with his party member, and he even called him a master hunter as well, which made Kelt smile. Elma ran at the Skull Lord, and this time he was certain that he would be able to cut it down. The monster roared, and as it was running towards Elma, Elma jumped into the air to level himself with the point where the monster's torso connected to its lower body, and Elma unleashed his most powerful attack with his relentless vigor, and it seemed that he was able to slice the monster open. Nothing could really be seen because Elma's half-dead savage dragon was now emitting a black electrical current, and his whole body was covered in what seemed to be black thunders. Elma looked a lot stronger than ever before, but that could only be related to the gravity of the entire situation. He knew that if his attack didn't land, or if it was just an inch off, the effort of the entire party and their struggle would have been in vain. But in the end, Elma's attack was so powerful that he was able to cut the Skull Lord in half. The Skull Lord's lower half with those horse legs was standing on the floor, while the upper half of its torso was flying through the air. As soon as the upper part fell onto the ground, the monster's lower body also collapsed on the floor, and with a sight of relief on everyone's faces, it seemed that they actually managed to defeat the Skull Lord, and Elma had gained over 9,000 experience points, raising his level to 71. Elma was really happy that they managed to win, because he thought that the whole raid party would be in danger, and maybe even the whole city of Lacornia as well. Mabel came running to her teammates, and she was really happy that they had defeated the Skull Lord, even when it was so much stronger than them, and Lucy's face was also showing signs of happiness. Elma said that it was everything thanks to Kelt, and he apologized for giving him the most crucial role in the whole plan, because nothing would be possible if he hadn't been able to dodge the lightning round impact. Kelt was lying on the ground, and he added how he never ever wanted to fight such a close battle as that one, and while he was crying out of sheer joy of staying alive, Elma realized where his attitude was coming from. But after all that fighting and anxiety and anticipation and the adrenaline, Kelt could really feel happy and satisfied with himself and with everyone else in his party, because it was such a good feeling to have brought down such a strong monster as the Skull Lord. Everyone's faces were showing clear signs of pure happiness and satisfaction, while the monster's body was slowly disintegrating into thin air. And after a couple of moments had passed, the Skull Lord completely disintegrated, and in place of its lower body, there stood its magic stone, which looked huge, and Elma looked at it with a calm face. He was probably the only person that could remain calm after seeing something as beautiful and as big as that. That's what she said. Kelt commented how he had never seen a level 85 magic stone before, and he asked himself what its price was, and when Elma looked at it, he told Kelt that it must have been somewhere around 10 million gold coins. Kelt was baffled with that number, and he said how the reward that the guild had promised everyone if they cleared the dungeon now looked rather small, and Kelt was a little bit jealous of Elma and Lucy. Elma joked with Kelt by saying how Lucy was the full package, thinking mostly about her luck increasing skills. But Elma was really interested in whether or not the monster left another item drop, and when he turned to take a look around, Elma saw that the Skull Lord's shield was laid on the ground. The item was extremely valuable, as it was sitting at 55 million gold for the market value, and its bonus to defensive stats was a whopping 88 points. On top of all that, it even had a bonus effect that said that no hell-hearted attacks would ever pass through the shield. Kelt commented how he knew that Dreamlords usually dropped items more commonly than other monsters, but he hadn't heard of a situation where it would drop items that adventurers could use on the spot, and he understood how valuable it was to have someone with great fortune skill tree in your party. Mabel joked with Kelt by saying how he was probably feeling guilty for not landing the final blow, and Kelt defended himself by saying how they wouldn't have been able to defeat the monster if he had tried something like that, and that would result in all of them dying. But Kelt also told Elma that because he ended up getting both that drop and the one from the patchwork monsters from a while ago, that Elma should at least buy him some drinks. Elma then proclaimed the shield's value, and when the others heard the price of 55 million gold, their jaws dropped as they were completely shocked with that information. Elma also added how he would love to keep the shield as it would be a very good upgrade in contrast to his Shield of Madness, even though it was a bit heavy for him now because of the difference in level, because Elma was level 71, and to properly be able to wield and hold the shield, one needed to be level 85. But more than anyone else, Elma understood and was aware of the fact that he was able to bring down the Skull Lord because of what others did as well, and their victory was a team effort, so that's why he wanted to share some of the rewards with Kelt, Mabel and Lucy as well. Mabel said that healers always received a good compensation from the guild whenever they were called to attend any type of raids, so she was happy with that. To add even more to her satisfaction, the sheer fact that her level had gone up by 4, even though she did the bare minimum because of her mana points already being low, she couldn't ask for much more. Mabel also added a joke by saying how Elma shouldn't feel obliged to share anything with Kelt, which made him upset, but Elma reassured Kelt and Mabel that they would meet up in the guild once more to distribute the awards evenly. The dungeon started to vanish like every other clear dungeon did after the Dream Lord was defeated, and they were about to be teleported back towards the entrance. Mabel said that even though their time as a party was up, she was really happy to be in the same party as Elma and Lucy, and Mabel also added Kelt's name on that list, but only after a short word to tease him. Mabel explained that they would lose against the Skull Lord and die if it weren't for him, but as Kelt didn't know how to properly take a compliment, he turned his head and said how Mabel was cruel, and he didn't believe her. Elma and Lucy were really happy because there was a friendly atmosphere in the air, but Elma didn't forget their true goal, and there were a lot of things that were still unclear and rather concerning. There were 3 major things that Elma was worried about, even though they managed to defeat the Skull Lord and thus cleared the whole dungeon, and while they were at it, they also found out what was causing all the anomalies in the world by finding the morning trapezohedron. They still didn't know who was the person that planned all of that out, and another thing was that the person was probably still nearby. Elma and the others got out from the dungeon into the damaged church area, and once they were out, the first person to notice them was only a dark silhouette, and the person didn't think that that would have ever been possible. Other adventurers were also surprised that someone actually managed to defeat the Wanderer's Lord and clear the dungeon, and some of them didn't even know whether that was considered as disobeying the raid rules. Some adventurers were clearly wounded as they had cuts and bruises and were bleeding all over, and they were actually glad that someone was able to beat the huge monster, and they realized that they were saved now. Elma only saw 10 people in front of him, and by counting the 4 of them, he realized that 6 people have gone missing, and that wasn't a good thing. Their original raid party was consisted of 20 members, and there were only 14 of them now. Elma knew that the adventurers that lost their lives in the dungeon would vanish along with the dungeon when it gets cleared. However, Elma was also concerned with the fact that he wasn't seeing any new faces among the 10 people in front of him. So that only meant that the culprits could be among the original raid party all along, or that they quickly escaped the dungeon and left after placing the morning trapezohedron, or that they had lost their lives and vanished along with the dungeon, maybe.
There's still time for you to surrender. As I have suffered.
magic, conquer the realm.
As the culprits were still unknown, Elma didn't have any information about them. Their class, level, and stats were all still a mystery. And on top of that, by the way everyone looked outside, Elma knew that they were as exhausted as they were, and that he should probably remain calm and patient and wait for another chance to try and expose the culprits. Kalos noticed that there was some commotion at the dungeon's entrance, and she went to see whose party was able to defeat the Wandering Lord, and when she came nearer, Elma proclaimed that it was them that defeated the Skull Lord. Kalos seemed really happy to see them, and she told Elma how she always knew that there was something about him that made him rather special, and Elma said that he wasn't that special because they wouldn't have been able to make it if just one of their party members wasn't alive and helping, and they seemed rather proud of their achievement. Kalos explained how she never thought that anyone would be able to defeat the Skull Lord, and that was the first time Elma realized that Kalos had 42. Kalos added how she tried to fight it all by herself because she knew that her other party members would just slow her down, but still Kalos wasn't able to do anything, and she just decided to run away and inform as many adventurers as she could to leave the dungeon. Hildy was sobbing behind her as she was really happy that her master was alive and well. Kalos told Hildy to stop crying, but Hildy knew that the situation was really serious this time and that everyone could have gotten killed. Kalos admitted that, and that's why she thanked Elma for saving everyone's lives. Kalos even took Elma's hand in hers and said how she was even more interested in him now and how she wanted to thank him properly when she had the chance. Is my boy about to get some action with Kalos? Elma's face showed signs of concern and confusion at the same time, and Kalos walked up to Elma and whispered how the matter had shed a bit more light on the entire situation, and it was inevitable that either the Marquise family or the guild had been involved. The only thing that was factual was that the disasters weren't happening on their own, and rather that someone wanted to see the world struggle. Everyone made their way back to Lacornia, the city of adventurers. Once they got there, our heroes were accompanied by Kalos to a fancy inn that felt like a luxury hotel more than an inn. Actually, everything looked so neat and tidy, it was amazing. Elma and Lucy sat across Kalos on individual armchairs, while Kalos was sitting on a large sofa. She started off the conversation by expressing her gratitude to both Elma and Lucy for helping her clear the dungeon and finish the raid successfully. Kalos continued by saying how, thanks to them, they now had more information about the true nature of all the disasters, and they were closer to finding everything out, and on top of that all, Kalos thanked Lucy and Elma for saving all of the surviving members of the raid and for saving the city of Lacornia, as it would have been in serious problems had they not defeated the Skull Lord. Elma knew that Kalos had already reported everything back to the guild about all the errors of the map and about the existence of the Morning Trapezohedron as well. I always have troubles pronouncing this thing's name, I'm sorry. So Elma thought to himself how the map wasn't inaccurate because the guild had made a mistake or two, and Elma was almost certain that it wasn't the work of adventurers that made some false reports from time to time, which was usual in the magic world. The only thing that was right about the map was the original path, and everything else, every small turn and detour were all scrambled up, and that was what made the whole thing suspicious. Because that was the case, even if adventurers were to somehow find out that the Dream Lord transformed into a Wandering Lord, when they started running, they were bound to get lost and eventually die to the monster. Elma knew that there wasn't any other reason why someone would make such alterations to the map apart from wanting to see as many adventurers as possible die in the dungeon. Elma thought that the Morning Trapezohedron was placed so deep in the dungeon just because of the fact that it would make it much harder for adventurers to exit the dungeon, which would result in greater chances of those adventurers ending up killed by the Skull Lord or even other monsters. Elma asked Kalos whether or not she was able to find out any information about the map errors or about the rare magic stone that caused all sorts of disasters, And Kalos responded how the adventurers killed in Laconia had a certain man that was an adventurer and later became an employee of the guild. It seemed that that man was very well trusted because he was doing an excellent job for the guild and everyone believed in him, and that's why he was entrusted with all the details for that dungeon raid. But the problem was that the man was missing as they speak and no one knew where he was, and Elma realized that he had disappeared. Kalos explained how she spent quite a lot of time traveling throughout the Sun Kingdom to try find out what or who caused those anomalies, and she was doing so without any success for a long time. And just when there were some clues, and when she had gotten some good information, the assumed culprit managed to slip away just like that, and the fact that she was once again left with nothing made Kalos really frustrated. But there was one thing that Kalos was sure of, and she was certain that whoever had been helping the culprit all that time, and who helped them escape, Kalos knew that they must have been either someone from the Marquis Holtod family, or from a faction that belonged to it. Kalos explained that there weren't many organizations and families that were able to successfully plan out so many covert operations, and after Elma listened to her, he said how that was a sound conclusion. But Elma thought to himself how there was a big flaw in that story because he couldn't think of a valid reason that would be a motive for the Marquise's family to do such things, because Elma couldn't understand how they would benefit from anything that happened in the last couple of months. Kalos continued by saying how it was inevitable that the culprit would most definitely strike again, and as it was proven in the previous raid that Kalos couldn't manage things on her own, she told Elma and Lucy that she would need their help when that happened because she couldn't trust the guild with such matters. Elma was frowning a bit because he was taking his time to think about it, and Kalos just sat there silently, and after some time, Elma responded that he would gladly help if Kalos was okay with trusting someone like him. Elma said that because there was a stigma in the magic world about heavy knights, and he just wanted to put that out there. Lucy also added that she was willing to help, and if there was anything that she could do, she would love to be notified as well. Kalos ended up thanking them and expressing her gratitude for even having had the privilege of meeting Elma and Lucy. Before they left the room, Kalos called out to them to say one more thing, and she explained that as big as the Sun Kingdom was, it was only protected by a small number of nobles, knights and adventurers, a few hundred tops, and that's why Kalos wanted to remind Elma and Lucy that she expected them to be at the top of their game whenever there was a need to help. Elma and Lucy didn't respond as they understood the gravity of the situation, and they exited the inn and went into the streets. When they started speaking with Kalos, it was daytime outside, and now the night had already settled in. Lucy knew that the mission was a complicated one, but she was smart enough to understand the basics, and she knew that the main thing that was causing all the problems was the fact that there existed some people that wanted to enhance the power of the monsters around Lacornia and to make them attack the city. Lucy wondered whether it would be okay if they waited and whether or not something bad would happen in the meantime, but Elma explained that they couldn't act as long as they didn't have definite proof, as that would cause much more trouble. Elma thought about the whole thing once again, and he came to a conclusion that the enemy's main objective was to create something called Zerg, which even Lucy didn't hear about before. Elma explained that the Zerg was the second evolution of a Dream Lord. The first evolution happened inside the dungeon when the conditions are met. However, that wasn't the only evolution that could occur, and the monster could continue eating and consuming adventurers for a while more. And if that happened, and if the conditions for the next evolution were to be met, the monster would then become bigger and stronger than the dungeon itself, which would force the dungeon to collapse. The Dreamlord would then take all the monsters from the dungeon, and they would begin something called a Nightmare's March, and that was the biggest disaster that could happen, as even towns like Lacornia would be in grave danger, because they would turn into graves. Okay, not funny, I'll see myself out. Now, Elma told Lucy that if achieving the Zerg was the main goal of the culprits, then they and everyone else that attended the raid quests were nothing but food for the Dream Lord, to put it simply. They were sacrificial lambs, and Lucy was really worried when she heard that. Elma opened the door of a tavern, and when they entered inside, they were welcomed by Kelt and Mabel, who were already sitting at one table. Seeing them made Elma and Lucy really happy. Kelt said how he was getting tired of all the waiting as Mabel was annoying him with her jokes, and Mabel said that they could have taken their time as she enjoyed messing with Kelt. Elma was happy with the fact that they had been successful in delaying the disaster for now, but he was also aware of the fact that even though they didn't know the exact identity of the culprit, it was evident that someone who wanted to see the world burn existed, and they actively worked to achieve their goals. But as not to spoil the festive mood, Elma decided not to speak about that. Lucy noticed how Mabel and Kelt had really gotten much closer to each other, and without much to add, they all agreed that it was high time to raise a toast in honor of their victory over the Skull Lord and a successful raid quest. After all, that was still a huge victory, not only for them, but for the city of Lacornia and the whole magic world as well. A couple of days had passed since the raid on the Cemetery of Sorrows, and as Elma and Lucy walked through the streets of Lacornia, Lucy thought how everything felt peaceful. Elma explained that after such a fight where one wrong step would end up with their deaths, everything would feel peaceful, and he looked rather relieved that the fight was over and that they had some time to rest and charge up their batteries. But Lucy thought that the general public wouldn't be as peaceful had they seen what they were up against in the dungeon.
Bei Jysk sparst du jetzt bis zu 60% auf viele Matratzen, Bettdecken und Kopfkissen. Jysk, großartige Angebote für deinen Schlaf.
But thanks to them defeating the Skull Lord, nothing bad happened, and the city and its population could continue with their everyday activities without any problems, but that still didn't mean that there wasn't someone who tried to make things a lot worse. Elma thought about the person that Kalos mentioned that worked as an employee at the guild. Elma realized that even though they didn't know the person's location, it seemed that the person and whoever they received help from didn't really care about the fact that the public found out about their existence and their malicious intentions. As much as Elma thought about the whole thing, the more he couldn't figure out who the culprits might be, because everything they knew wasn't adding up. There was nothing that constantly thinking about it would change, and that's why Elma and Lucy made their way towards the Adventurers Guild with the goal of seeking out their next dungeon. Elma explained that before anything bad happened, their only way to prepare for anything that might wait for them was to get stronger, and that's why it was really important that they continue farming experience and gold, and Lucy couldn't agree more with him. When they came at the notice board, Kelt noticed them and came to say hi. Kelt said that he might have some interesting information, and he added a phrase that caught Elma's attention. A good adventurer is quick on the uptake and quick on the run. And with that in mind, Elma told Kelt that he was a good adventurer if those were the criteria, and Kelt apologized for trying to flee from the fight against the patchwork monsters. Elma turned to Lucy and wondered whether she would be interested in something interesting that Kelt had for them, and the look of happiness on Lucy's face showed that she was all in. Elma turned back to Kelt to tell him that they wanted to hear him out, but Kelt said that they should probably go somewhere else, and when he was about to explain why, a couple of adventurers that were sitting at a table behind Kelt started making comments about how Kelt found another party to shoot them and cheat their money away from them. Kelt turned around and gave the adventurers a glaring look, and he told Elma and Lucy to leave the place with him. Elma commented that he thought how they were making a name for themselves as well, but as those adventurers hadn't been able to recognize him, he guessed that that wasn't really the case, and Lucy joked about how everyone thought that Kelt was a criminal and scammer. But with that being said, Elma and Lucy exited the guild and went into a nearby tavern with Kelt. After they sat at a table and ordered their drinks, Elma immediately cut to the chase and asked Kelt how much money he wanted for his information. Kelt replied how he wasn't trying to scam them in any way and that he wasn't asking for money. So he continued with his story by saying how he heard that there were some rather strange things happening inside the Marquis family, and Elma and Lucy all of a sudden became much more invested in the entire conversation. Kelt explained how the nobles in that kingdom also had a similar tradition to that of the Edmund family as well, and that was that they valued abilities more than they valued blood ties. That didn't mean that anyone could become a part of the noble family, but what it meant was that even the youngest child could become the next head of the family, depending on the outcome of his baptism, and in special occasions, Even a very distant relative could become the best candidate for the spot of the family heir. With that being said, Kelt overheard that there were some factions that had been formed inside the family, and they fought and schemed against each other over the position of the next heir, and from what Kelt could tell, there was quite a lot of plotting present. On top of all that, the current family head thought that such things were necessary and that the next heir needed to be resourceful, and that was only a part of being the leader, and therefore he was willing to turn a blind eye even if there were casualties in the entire process. Elma said that he heard about him before, but he never knew that he was so wicked. Kel continued by telling them about the eldest daughter of the family called Snow Hole Todd. It was said that she was a genius swordsman and that she was famous for being calculating, merciless, and that she barely ever talked. Kel said how she was a bit strange, but in the past couple of weeks, she had used all sorts of schemes and connections with other nobles to make significant achievements by sheer force. Kel said how he understood her will and desire to become the next heir, but he had certain suspicions when it came to recent events that worried all of them. Elma thought that that story might have some truth to it, because such a story was believable after all. Elma could imagine such a scenario, and he thought that it was quite possible. Kelt was surprised with how fast Elma understood things, and because he knew that Elma was interested in that matter, Kelt decided to tell him. Elma thanked Kelt for his concerns and for sharing the information with him, but he also knew that that wasn't the only thing Kelt wanted to talk about. So Kelt told them to prepare themselves, and he told them that the guild had been keeping that a secret from the adventurers, that a rare dungeon had appeared a little bit further away from the city. Lucy was surprised, and Kelt said that such a dungeon could bring them a lot of gold, but Elma said that they were just B-rank adventurers, and that such rare dungeons should be left to A-rank adventurers, and Kelt thought how Elma was a party pooper. Kelt tried to explain that he thought that Elma would be interested, and that's why he mentioned it, and before he could say anything else, Elma interrupted him to ask about the dungeon's name. Kelt said that he didn't know for sure, but from what he had heard, it seemed that the name of the dungeon was the Tower of the Mythical Beasts, and Elma repeated the name of the dungeon out loud because he was shocked. The bartender heard him, and Lucy tried telling Elma to calm down and lower his voice, as that should have remained a secret, and Elma apologized for getting too hyped up. Kelt never thought about trying to clear the dungeon even if Elma and Lucy wanted him to come, but he was curious about why Elma was so surprised. Elma explained that there were such dungeons that had special bonus stages which were really rare, and they contained extra rare item drops and monsters. Lucy asked him if there was a special item he had wanted from himself from this dungeon, and Elma told her that one of the monsters in the Tower of Mythical Beasts was a Grim Reaper. And with that being said, Elma explained that that monster could drop the skill book that Lucy needed for her crit build, the Reaper's Assassin. Elma explained that that skill tree was as crucial to a jester as the smoldering Fang of Madness was to a heavy knight, and Elma said how all other skills that a jester learned prior to acquiring that skill tree could be seen just as tutorial. Elma explained how that skill tree was really good for all classes that focused on close combat, but the only one that could use its potential to the fullest capacity was the Jester class, because it had a lock increasing skill, which was the most important thing for the Reaper's Assassin. Elma said that if Lucy were to acquire that skill tree, she might even become stronger than him for a little while, and Lucy was thrilled to hear that, and she begged Elma to raid the dungeon as that would make her rather happy and satisfied. Elma told her that she didn't need to convince him anymore, and he turned around to Kelt to ask him whether he would accompany them, because they could need some help from experienced B-rank adventurers, and Kelt said that he needed to refuse their invitation as he had some other business that he needed to see too. On top of that, Kelt said that he was always trying to do everything as cleaner as possible, and he wasn't really keen on taking risks. Kelt also told Elma that they should maybe slow down a bit, because they might lose focus of the bigger picture, and even though Kelt was right, Elma was thinking about whom they would invite, as there wasn't a lot of B-rank adventurers left. Elma knew that B-rank adventurers weren't abundant, and that was even more true when they talked about solo adventurers like Kelt. Elma thought about Mabel, but he thought that she had a fixed party of her own, and as much as Elma thought about it, he couldn't think of a person that could replace Kelt. Elma ended up telling Lucy that they would be better off with just the two of them entering the dungeon, and Lucy was really happy about that as well, and she couldn't wait to get going. They immediately stood up from the table, paid their drinks, and went out on the streets to search for a carriage. They found one, and the driver took them out of Laconia, and he dropped them off near a mountain shed where Elma and Lucy spent the night. When they woke up, they made their way up a nearby mountain, and after some hiking, they could finally see the dungeon's dream hole, and Elma was happy to see that no one had cleared it yet. While they walked to the dungeon's entrance, Lucy asked him whether or not Elma was sure that they would be able to clear the dungeon in a short time frame, and she added how she never heard of such rare dungeons before. Elma explained that there was a catch with such dungeons. The dungeons would start to collapse after a certain number of monsters had been killed, and even if the Dream Lord hadn't been defeated, the rare dungeon would vanish. Elma remembered how in the game, adventurers rushed in and they never came back, and the fact that the guild was hiding the dungeon's existence could mean that someone influential was farming jobs for profit. But no one said that it was forbidden to enter the dungeon, and Elma wasn't going to let the chance to snatch away the Reaper's Assassin's Guild book slip away. When they entered, Lucy wondered that the recommended level 80 was a bit high, and Elma agreed with her. He told her that because of that, they wouldn't be going too deep into the dungeon, and that they would try to stay away from dangerous monsters and suspicious places. He explained that their only goal was to acquire the skill book for Lucy, and as Lucy took a look around, she saw that there was a window even though they were in a dungeon. When she looked outside, she couldn't see the ground because they were so high up in the air. Elma explained that that was all part of Alzeron's dream, and that she should keep away from looking through the window as they couldn't know what would happen if she fell. Lucy immediately created some distance between herself and the window. Elma cracked his fingers, and Lucy took a fighting stance as well as they prepared themselves to start their expedition to get Lucy's Reaper's Assassin's Skill book. The monster Elma and Lucy were hunting, the Grim Reaper, was very strong, and its attacks covered a large area because of its scythe, and its special skill called Spectral Permeation allowed it to pass through walls and physical attacks as well. Elma knew that the monster would end up giving them a lot of problems because it had high evasion skills, and its attacking stats were also over the roof. The hallways of the dungeon were decorated with gargoyle statues, and while they walked further into the dungeon, Elma told Lucy that they would try to stay away from other monsters and that they would fight them only if they needed to. While they talked, one of those gargoyle statues seemed to be alive, and when Elma and Lucy passed by it, the monster started following them. Elma noticed that, and he quickly turned around to use Shield Bash to send the monster backwards so they could run up the stairs. They entered another hallway which was a bit more spacious, and when they realized that they were safe from the monster, Elma commented how his new shield was really powerful because the monster had gone further than it usually would. They walked further into the dungeon, climbed some more stairs. Elma had to warn Lucy not to fall through some cracks on the floor, and Lucy was really suspicious of every other gargoyle statue that they came across. I mean, this is literally me in every single video game I play. If I play a video game and you show me a statue, and one of these statues attack me, and none ever attack me again, I will always think another one is gonna attack me again. Now, while they walked through the Tower of